to the Fisher Protocol, the show where saying The Who is the greatest rock and roll band of all time is not subjective, but everything else is. Please take a quick second to like, subscribe, and share us with your Who-minded friends. Sorry about the Who-minded friends rant I went on last time, everyone. I won't do that again. The Who is a passion of ours and is more of a personal journey. No money is made from these videos, so liking and subscribing lets us know we're not alone in Wholand. Constructive feedback is always welcome, either in the comments below, or you can follow me as I spout Who-related content, sometimes pretty snarky, on Twitter and Instagram at Fisher Protocol. I am Ethan. Today I'm being joined by Betts. Tom is on assignment for a bit, but we'll be back. And we do not claim to be experts, just fans who like to talk about the greatest rock and roll band of all time, The Who. Hey, Betts, how's it going?
It's going. How's it going with you, Ethan?
It's going good. I don't want to act like no one's here. I haven't figured out how to have social graces to do this thing and bring someone on later. So today's guest is founder of CrazyOnClassicRock.com. That's where she hosts her blog, The Diversity of Classic Rock, where she talks about all things classic rock, which just celebrated its 7th year anniversary. That's right, 7? Angie?
Yes,
yep.
7 years.
More importantly, Pete Townsend once winked at her.
And I have my signed copy of Who I Am right here.
Please welcome
Nice.
Please welcome blogger and, more importantly, mother of Bowie the cat, Angie Moon.
Hi.
Hey, Andy.
Happy to be here.
So, I guess we all know each other through Who Twitter, which is a fascinating place. You should visit sometime. I've been reading your blog for probably about a year now. I've threatened to have you on for a very long time. I wanted you to come on.
Yeah, and I'm so happy it's finally happened.
Well, I wanted to bring you on because I know you like early classic rock more than anything.
Yes.
And that just comes across in what you say online and your blog and everything. And it doesn't seem to me you have much use for things after 1975.
Yeah,
in general.
I do like some punk, like some of that. I like disco. I am opening my mind to more and more 80s stuff, but for the most part, yeah, it's all 60s, 70s. I even prefer, like, if you were to ask me, like, of the neighboring eras, I prefer, like, the early rock and roll stuff to the stuff that came in the 80s, but yeah, that's just my opinion.
No, it's very valid. And when it comes to, like, 80s stuff, I'm more into the synthy, new ordery vibe anyway. Something weird happens to classic rock bands when they're put through that 80s filter.
Yeah, like, I don't like, I think that's the thing. I made the mistake when I was getting into 80s, like, listening to 80s stuff, is I was listening to the Dinosaurs, and I was like, no, don't listen to the Dinosaurs. You gotta listen to the new stuff. Because the new stuff is where it's at, because, you know, after a while, you first start off, like, when you're a new rock band, you challenge the establishment. But then, you become the establishment. And we constantly need fresh and new ideas, new faces, and stuff like that. So definitely, I think with later eras, listen to the stuff that's new. Listen to the stuff that, like, it's just new, different people.
I'm going to allow myself to go on some tangents here because this is obviously a broad classic rock conversation here. Even though we are going to talk about The Who in a second. But when you say that, it brings to me, like, the very first CD my family ever had was Invisible Touch. Like, the first compact disc was Invisible Touch by Genesis. Phil Collins' Genesis. My favorite Genesis. Okay, so don't... Everyone, keep it cool in the comments, all right? I know, I get it. You're upset that I said that. I'm sorry. But but I didn't even know, like, Peter Gabriel was Sledgehammer guy. You know what I mean? I had no idea about that in the 80s. I just had no idea. I thought, Phil Collins and Pleats, that's where it was at, right? With their headless guitars. So that's my 80s sojourn. Anyway, let's get to it. Where did the classic rock thing start for you?
For me, okay, so this is back when I was in secondary school. So I was 14 years old. I did not like any of the mainstream stuff. So by the time by the time I was in high school, so that would be like 2008, I just didn't like what was on the radio. It was all just rock music that just was about the stupidest topics or just really just dumb stuff that I just didn't understand. It didn't resonate with me. There was also, like, I think Taylor Swift was popular during that time too. That wasn't my thing, so I was listening to indie music. But then one day I was just really bored and I decided to watch Austin Powers. And then I got into the 60s. I was like, whoa, this is the coolest looking thing ever. And then the music. Oh my God, this is amazing. This is so much better than anything I've ever heard. And I was like, okay, I have to just deep dive into this. So then, my gateway group, like many millennial classic rock fans, the Beatles, of course. And then from there, I got into, the contemporaries. So like the other British invasion groups, the Stones, the Who, the Kinks, and the Small Faces as well. And then like from there, I got into other eras and just slowly made my way through like that classic rock era.
Yeah, I remember when I asked you about some Faces. I think I sent you guys both like a message the same morning. I was like, I need some Faces songs, and I don't know if you remember that, Bets. And yeah, and I asked you, and you're like, I'm not really into the Faces. I'm into the Small Faces. I don't like Rod Stewart. I'm like, all right, you're my kind of person. Like we can deal with this. Like I love Rod Stewart, but like the fact that like you have your boundaries and you know what they are, and you're like, I'm not going to help you out with that because I don't like that.
Yeah, like there's some musicians that's like I can't stand their voice. Nope.
So what year was Austin? Was it the first Austin Powers? The second one? What?
I watched. Okay, so the first one I watched was 1997 Austin Powers. So that was the first one. Then I watched The Spice Academy, which was the second one, and then Goldmember, of course. And I was like really obsessed with Austin Powers. Thankfully, I do not keep in contact with my secondary school friends because they would clown on me for my love of Austin Powers. Like, I would constantly talk about it around my friends, and then I'd talk about the classic rock stuff. And in my last year of secondary school, I had this really close friend. Her name was Kellyanna, and she was a vinyl collector. And she gave me my first vinyl, which was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, because she knew how much I loved classic rock, and she was like, you don't have any records of your own? I'm going to get you one. So one day she just surprised me and said, here it is, Dark Side of the Moon. And yeah. So
Never heard of that one. Never heard of that one. What's on that? No.
So cliched.
I call that Rainbow Triangle. That's what I call that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then around that time when I was in...
But you have to start with that stuff, right? Because that's...
Oh, yeah.
That is...
Like, it's cliched, but you start with it because it's an essential.
Mm-hmm.
Like, then you can get into the deeper cuts. I definitely think you can't really get into the deeper cuts till you listen to, like, the popular stuff and you know what all the bands were all about.
I mean, that's true. And Dark Side is one of those albums where, like, I had listened to so much classic rock radio, but I never listened to the album before. And so when I listened to the album, I knew all the songs already because I heard them all in different versions. I was like, oh, they go together? Yeah. That's weird. Rumors is a lot like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also got that one on vinyl. I got it for 75 cents, which was a pretty incredible deal. Well, at least for me, I mean, being a millennial, like, I got my copy, I think, 2013?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
why
that was special to me.
I'm definitely falling for all this 180 gram nonsense. I'm falling for it because, it's the weight of the vinyl and it's heavier and everything, but you have to flip it over every 2 songs. That's mildly annoying. To get through one Florence and the Machine record, I have to flip the record like 8 times. So, and I only ask which Austin Powers movies because I'm pretty familiar with them, but I know that second one I think has the interludes with him at the band.
We're talking about My Generation.
Well, yeah, My Generation. That's what I was thinking, and also like I think it's Matthew Sweet and Susanna Hoffs.
Yeah, Ming T.
What?
Is it the Ming T?
It might be.
That's it.
Yeah, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
When it's them together, because I know I have some of their covers albums, and I know that. But.
Yeah, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about now, and I had those CDs too, the covers, and I can't remember what they called it, but I love those records.
And yeah, being such a guy that I was so into the Byrds and the Tom Petty, and connecting all those, and even like the Gin Blossoms, kind of like putting those kind of things together as far as jangly pop, what they would call jangly pop.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, I love that stuff. In fact, I've been doing a lot of Monkeys lately.
I think the first time I got into jangle stuff like properly was, oddly enough, listening to the Stone Roses.
Okay.
And then I was just like, whoa, this sounds so cool. But and then my dad was like, no, that just sounds like stuff that the Byrds did in the 60s. And I was like, wait, that's so true. But I love it.
And Stone Roses are part of Manchester scene, right?
Manchester, yeah.
Yeah, so like I'm so like Oasis, New Order, Hacienda heavy in what I like that I haven't heard the Stone Roses, but I know they're in that
Oh, it's such a great album. It's like one of those perfect albums. I definitely think like it's weird that that was like my introduction to Jangle Pop because that is like way after like my I guess the peak classic rock that I listened to. Like that's 1989 there.
But at some point, we're kind of just kind of repackaging what we've heard before, and for you know,
To me, it's just like it's so retro that it sounds so ahead of its time. It's just weird, like that feeling, but I love it.
Okay, so your blog is called The Diversity of Classic Rock.
Yes.
I guess my main question about that is because reading your blog, which I've done before and I've gone over in the past couple days, I feel like you know way more music than I do, especially from that era. Like there's stuff
thank you.
I've never heard of. That's great. But what led you to want to write about it?
Well, I started the blog as a school project back in university. So the first time I went to Ireland, I was doing a study abroad year. So I arrived here in 2014, and that's how I met my husband, Owen. So yeah, that's how you pronounce his name in case anybody has been reading my blog and see this name that's Eoin. Yeah, that's Owen, that's my husband. And basically, I was taking journalism classes at the university. And I was a communications major, but that was like the most adjacent thing. And I wanted to go exchange in a country where, you know, they still speak English because I already have enough anxiety speaking as it is. Can't imagine another language just complicating that. So like I took this class called Introduction to Social Media. And one of the assignments was start your own blog. And it could be about anything. And I knew that's it. I'm going to write the diversity of classic rock. And I had the idea in my head for about a year. So the year before, I did radio at my school in Chicago, and I had a radio show. Now the thing is, you couldn't title your radio show. You couldn't even say your name on the station because the whole trademark of the station was that the DJs were faceless and nameless. And you had to play a mix of songs. And I remember I was and I played like heavily 60s, 70s stuff. And I was criticized so much for zeroing in and focusing so much on that era. And they were like, there's no diversity. And this guy was like, it's all a bunch of old white guys that you're playing. And I was like, that's not true. And I was like, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. And then that's how the diversity of classic rock started. I was like, I'm going to go research as much as I can. Then I'm going to go write this blog. And that's what I've been doing for 7 years.
Beth, do you have any questions or anything?
I just listening to it, and let me see what I got here. I do. So I was talking about a class project and all that kind of thing, and yeah, like I don't know that I all I can say really is that a lot of our opinions pretty much align with each other, and yeah, especially when you talked about how the introduction of the internet was so important for classic rock fans, that a lot of times what we have to our only resources were like books or things that you would happen to find along the way until the internet came along. And you want to talk about that a little bit, like how important that was for a classic rock fan?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So I rewrote like a new intro yesterday. Well, actually I did that over the weekend, but I posted it yesterday. And basically, I mean, one of the things is, like, I always lament just being born 50 years too late. Like, I really wish I was born in 1944, because then I could really have an appreciation for, like, the late 50s rockabilly stuff. And then I could really just live my peak years in the 60s and enjoy all the music and live through it, like for real. And then, you know, have my, you know, later adult years in the 70s. And would I even make it to the 80s? I don't know. But, you know, there are definitely advantages to being a millennial because, like, right now, like with the internet, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet of classic rock music. You don't have to wait for the next thing to come out. It's all there, and it's all there to explore. But at the same time, it can make it very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh my God, like I look at that when it comes to old Hollywood, for example. Like I like movies, but I would never say I'm a movie buff. I mean, there were times I definitely spend lots of time watching movies, but I'm definitely far from being a film buff, and it intimidates me because there's just so many old Hollywood movies, so many classic movies out there, and it's like, oh my God, especially when you get into the ones that are in foreign languages, and then you have to read the subtitles, and that's just, you know, some brain power there that's required while you're watching a movie. And that intimidates me. And what I wanted to do with my blog was make classic rock less intimidating to people. Like just, okay, this is the guide that I wish I had when I was getting into classic rock as a teenager. That's what I wanted to write.
Yeah, it's still amazing to me that I'll still find things that are brand new that I've never, seen or heard before. Like last night, somebody sent a link to an Instagram post. I want to say it's Under a Raging Moon that NPR just had this thing. It was an interview with the Who when they played that high school. Like no one's heard this before in probably 50 years, but it's new.
That's the thing. Like, I wonder, what are these rock stars keeping in their vaults? Like, what are they keeping from us? I want to hear it.
Exactly.
I have mixed feelings about that, but I think that's another topic for another time. But what you were talking about being born at that time, right after World War II, I might add, because Who Jews are the best Jews, right? Right.
Yes.
I definitely had a shirt in high school, and it was called Who, and it said Who Jew on it.
I need one. Wait, I need to get one.
Yeah. The long story, didn't go over well in school. People out synagogue were all about it. But it reminds me of that scene in Quadrophenia, the movie, with Ray Winston and Phil Daniels, where the rocker is in the tub, right? And he's singing
Yes.
Baba Luba, and Phil's
You really
singing
got
the
me.
Kinks, right? And in my mind, I'm thinking, I love Elvis so much, and I love the Who so much. I don't see, a piece, hippie, like what, I don't see why these people are fighting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like all those mod rock stars, like all the British invasion people, they all loved Elvis. They all love Buddy Holly. They all love Eddie Cochran. They all love Gene Vincent. They all love that.
Yeah. So that's one part of Quadrophenia that was.
Like, I think the mod image that so many of these bands had in the 60s is fabricated.
Oh yeah, the Who definitely.
It was a marketing thing. Like the Who definitely. The Small Faces, I think, was more authentic. But definitely no. I mean, all those were just outfits. Like those band uniforms. Those were all just uniforms that were, they just outfit them in them and say, yeah, well, you need to have an image, so this is your image. And that's how you can tell what's an early 60s versus what's a late 60s, because in the late 60s, everybody just wore what they wanted.
Yeah.
Right. So specific. Oh, by the way, Bets, I did get that bit of audio, and I listened to about a minute of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to save that for later. I don't know how many times I can listen to stuff like that. They're being like silly, which is what they do, and I'm so stuck on the seriousness of what they're doing in the studio. That's why I just want to get back type documentary, except for the Who, so bad. I want to hear those.
I would watch that, but then again, would it be too much? Because I found it too much with the Beatles, and I adore the Beatles. I mean, as much as I may go a long time without listening to them, as soon as I hear the Beatles on the radio, I hear them in public. It's like, oh my god.
No, for the Who, I would want to hear it over and over again, and that's the thing. Like, me and Tom did a review of the first part of Get Back, and that was the second time we'd both seen the first part. And we're both like, we need to rest and not watch. It's a very intensive experience that we're playing. It's kind of the most fascinating thing I've ever seen, honestly, but it's very intense. Just to hear like Paul and like John talking over lunch, like when they hid that camera in the planter, like. To hear them talking about George quitting, it was like, wow, okay, we shouldn't be hearing this. All right, so let's talk about a good band for a change, okay? Let's talk about the Who for a minute. What was your first Who experience besides My Generation from Austin Powers?
Okay, in my case, I'm trying to think. I think I usually just go through, like, the band's discography from beginning to end. That's always how I do. Like, so definitely like the whole My Generation album, but I think Tommy would have been like the second one I really, really listened to and really appreciated. I think Tommy is my favorite Who album. And and it has a lot of competition. Like the Who are one of those bands that they had a really good trajectory. I compare their trajectory to the Kinks as far as like the album quality, because I think in the early years, excellent. Like the Who's run from 1965 to 1973, amazing. And then after that, I'm just like, what is going on here? I don't like this. I don't get this. It was kind of disappointing considering the output that was so superior. But yeah, like Tommy, definitely I got into that. And then the movie. And the movie was just huge to me as a teenager. Like, it was the ultimate example of fan service. And I was just like, when I was watching, like, Roger Daltrey going around shirtless, and then as a bisexual, liking Anne Margaret too. And it's just like, oh my god, how come there's no people like this around me?
I definitely had to stop myself from tweeting about Anne Margaret last week for a while. Definitely was looking up some pictures, and I made my son watch Bye Bye Birdie after it. It was like, turned in, that's why we started watching Tommy, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
So you have first of all, I disagree, but that's because on the later stuff, that's only because I feel like Pete Townsend was specifically writing for me through his whole career. I've talked about that one here many times. So when he felt like pouring his heart out, or however much I booze or whatever, A Portrait of a Man at 35, I felt like,
yeah,
that was me.
Maybe it's because I'm under that age that I still don't get it. Maybe I'll get it when I'm older.
Maybe. I mean, listen to How Many Friends, like, in 10 years. You know what I mean? You might get something different from it.
Yeah.
And I see you're wearing your shirt from Quadrophenia Tour.
Yeah.
Have you seen? You've seen them? You saw the band? Yes.
Yes. So I saw them at the Hamilton date. So Hamilton's just a city outside of Toronto. I think about an hour away by train. I think. And then I saw Roger Daltrey solo as my high school graduation present, and this was in 2011. I actually found a video I took of that concert. Now, I was in the nosebleeds because we didn't have a lot of money, and certainly it was a bit, I was like buying them kind of almost last minute, but my dad and I went, and this was while my dad was on a road trip, so we saw them in Hollywood, Florida. It was a great concert. I was like, and as a kid, I didn't like going to concerts because I found them very loud, but I really liked that one, and that's what sparked me wanting to go to concerts again, was seeing Roger Daltrey live. And I think another thing I remember from that concert was Roger Daltrey having an appreciation for country music, and I didn't like country music, but now I'm like, okay, maybe I should listen to what my idols have to say on different types of music and really open my mind. And I think classic rock, as much as I have a laser focus on it, it definitely opened my mind.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to make a distinction between what Roger Daltrey likes and what people call country music today, because it's not the same thing.
Oh yeah, no, Taylor Swift is not country music.
He likes Johnny
Rock,
Cash
no.
and stuff like that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
real stuff. Graham Parsons, love Graham Parsons.
In fact, I have an autograph of Roger
Dolly
Daltrey's.
Parton.
I have an autograph of Roger Daltrey. Someone got me at a Teenage Cancer Trust, and
Nice.
it's on a lyric sheet for Johnny Cash songs that he was singing that night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
That's cool.
it is cool. I just found it,
And I think what I couldn't get over with that concert was how good Roger Daltrey's voice was. It was still so good. Like the other one that I couldn't get over, a couple years after that, so this was in 2015, I saw the Manfreds live. So that would be some of the members of Manfred Mann minus Manfred himself. And the lead singer, Paul Jones, he still sounded great. And I had really good tickets. Like I was in like the first few rows for that one. That was really, really cool.
And so did they do Diddy and Blinded by the Light?
They didn't do Blinded by the Light because that's Manfred Mann's Earth Band, which is a distinction there because Manfred himself was in that, but the rest of the band were not. So yeah, Manfred Mann are a band that really changed a lot over the years for sure. And I definitely want to do a blog post series on like bands that really changed, like you couldn't even recognize. Is that really the same group?
Right, Jefferson Starship.
Fleetwood Mac.
Jefferson
like
Airplane.
Fleetwood
Yeah.
Mac.
Oh yeah, definitely changed a lot.
Bets, I know you looked at the blog for the live albums.
Yes.
Talk about what you found out and ask Angie about it, because I have thoughts.
Yes. that was the very first blog post I think I read, and again, your ideas and my ideas kind of align here, which is that live albums kind of don't quite capture a band like a studio does, but there are exceptions. And some of those exceptions were things I actually grew up with, like Cheap Trick. After the Beatles, my favorite band after that was Cheap Trick, because Budokan was such a thing. I found your take really interesting on that. And some of those bands that you mentioned, like Indochine, I had never heard of before.
I got into them because of my friend Amanda. So my friend Amanda, she likes French music. So like she definitely told me about Indochine. I was like, okay, I'm gonna give them a chance. Holy crap, they're really good. They're really good. Zenith, very, very good. Yeah,
so that's great, because like I said, that's something I would never have thought of before, a band like that. I'd never heard of them. Yes songs with Rick Wakeman and that kind of thing. We love it. So yeah, I have to say we aligned on a lot of it. Outside of the ones that you talked about, are there any other live albums that you could think of that would fit that sort of the band is better live than in the studio?
Obviously, like Live at Leeds is just the perfect example of that. Like that's just the perfect example of band does better. God, I think I put like 20 live albums in there.
Yeah, you did. There were a lot.
Which were a lot of them.
We had a lot of homework to do.
Yeah,
Oh
there.
my
You know,
God.
I didn't listen to the ones I hadn't heard of. There was a lot. I did have a question.
Rory Gallagher was an excellent one. Like Rory
Yes.
Gallagher. God.
Yes.
Like, so good. And then recently I saw a band called Dea Matrona, and they were really, really good live, like better than in the studio. And they just have such a good chemistry, like the two girls in the group. Molly and Orla, that's their names. Yeah. Great chemistry. And the coolest thing about Dea Matrona is they switch their instruments. So they both play bass and guitar, and they'll just switch them in the middle of the set.
Oh wow, that keeps you on your toes for real. Yeah, I was thinking we were talking earlier about '80s bands and that kind of thing, and live albums, and one of the ones that came to mind for me, an '80s band that sounds better kind of live than in the studio, would be the Replacements, and it made me dig out the Replacements at Maxwell's in 1985, and they were one of those bands that like, if you saw them live, it was kind of 50-50 chance as to what you were going to get. They were either going to be like on fire or they were just going to crash and burn. And so if you're looking for something from the 80s in that sort of realm, Maxwell's The Replacements 1985, great album. You see him stumble every now and then, which is pretty funny, but really.
Oh, yeah, one of the live albums I forgot to talk about on that one, and I forgot how good it was, Slade Alive.
Yeah.
Like that one, I'm like, how could I forget that one? That one's really good. Like I went through a phase where I listened to a lot of glam rock, like 70s glam rock. Like a lot of people think, oh, so you listen to the 80s hair metal. No, original glam rock only, please.
Listen, I have a hard time explaining to people why "Satellite of Love" is one of my all-time favorite songs.
Oh, that's a beautiful song.
I can't describe it. I heard it unexpectedly, and I was like, "What is this thing?" And every time someone plays "Walk on the Wild Side," I'm like, "You guys are effing up. You guys go down the record a little bit. There's the greatest song ever is like 2 tracks away. Just So,
oh, those 2 songs are great though.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. I mean,
classics.
and I think Ronson is the. I would love to hear your take. I'd like to hear a blog post on Ronson from you, because he's the glue that holds all that stuff together. All that Lou Reed, David Bowie stuff in that time all has Ronson in the center of it, and it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I digress. On your list, here's what I like.
All right.
The Live at Leeds is okay. I'm kidding, obviously. I like it a lot. I do like Cheap Trick. I am such a Thin Lizzy fan.
Yes.
It's
Live and Dangerous. Oh my god.
And when they get to things like Emerald, right? Like,
oh, that's my favorite.
I was playing that all St. Patrick's Day, because that, there's nothing more hardcore Irish than that, I think.
Oh, no, then there's Black Rose, a Rock Legend. Like, the title track of Black Rose, Rock Legend, the wordplay that Phil Lynott did. I'm just like, that is genius. Like, that is like, a lot of people think that classic rock is just stupid and just frivolous stuff. And I'm like, no, there's actual poetry in it. Just like Phil Lynott song lyrics, Bob Dylan.
Right. So I love that. I think Huey Lewis played harmonica on that record, if I read that somewhere.
He did.
Okay. Which is an interesting tidbit for sure. A cowboy song, of course, I love. Peter Frampton. I didn't hear a lot of them. I think when they reissued on when they did a reissue on VHS of Stop Making Sense, and my brother got it, and I played that thing. And since I was so into guitar at the time, the first thing that got me on it is literally like Byrne walks out with this tape recorder, right? And he says, I have a tape I want to play. He hits the button, and the crystal clear sound of that Martin guitar and the way they had the sound editing done on that thing matched so perfectly. And all the way through Slippery People and everything. It's one of my favorite all-time albums.
It's a great album, yeah. Like that's one I need to listen to more. I like the Talking Heads. I just don't listen to them enough.
Yeah, and I had to, it's really annoying for my family to live with me, because my son watched this movie called Free Guy, and it had that Mariah Carey song Fantasy in it. And I'm like,
Oh yeah, that's Tom Tom Club.
yeah, and I'm like, oh hey, yeah, so we'll listen to that, but then we're gonna listen to this, which is Genius of Love, right? And by the Tom Tom Club, and yeah,
That's Tina Weymouth's side project.
yeah, and I want to read that book too. Chris wrote a book last year,
Yeah.
and
Romanian Love.
yeah, I really want to read that. And I'm gonna skip yes because no one wants to hear me no one wants to hear me talk about that. But I am gonna do a segue here because we're talking about Queen live at the Rainbow '74, okay? And the most repeated image in my house, besides that of Pete Townsend or Florence Welch, is Freddie Mercury in his yellow jacket. I have it on blankets. I have it on cups. I have it everywhere. It is my definition of what a showman is
Yes.
actually Freddie Mercury, especially live at Wembley. I watched that so many times when I was a kid. Are you familiar with Live at Wembley, that one?
Not as much because I like the earlier stuff. I mean, of course, I've seen Live Aid and stuff like that, but
Right.
like I like the earlier Queen stuff, like the stuff they did in the '70s, like the early stuff. So from Queen 1 all the way to Day at the Races, I like that the best. But yeah, I'll need to watch Wembley. I think besides clips, I haven't seen much of it, but I do want to.
But it leads me, and I gotta find it, to your blog that you do called "Listen to This, Not That."
Oh my gosh, that series is so much fun to write because it's like where I can go like one track mind with a band. And I can just really just dive in and appreciate them. And often I find I'm appreciating that band so much more after writing that.
But I messaged you yesterday after I read the Queen one that my heart was broken. I started to cry. But that was before I read like your rules. What are your rules for like this, not that?
So like, I don't do the same for every single band because there's a couple ones that I decided to bend the rules a little bit because I didn't think they were as overexposed. So I did that for the Kinks. Pink Floyd, I did something a bit different where I didn't talk about Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall because I'm like, everybody knows those albums. But like for Queen, I did no top 20 hits, no greatest hits. You can't include either of those. Because I thought this is going to be a challenge. Because I'm like, okay, I'm going to really have to go and find those deeper tracks.
Yeah, because the second half of your list, I grew up with the classic Queen CD, which is Greatest Hits 2, basically. And it was my blueprint for Queen. And like every single song on that CD is on your list of don't listen to those. And I was like, oh. But then I read your rules, and I felt better.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, everybody knows those songs. So that's the thing. I wanted to do like, okay, I want to just show like the underappreciated stuff and really the early stuff, like Queen 2. God, that album, I think it was like technically a flop as far as like it wasn't a commercial success, but wow, artistically, that is the furthest thing from a flop. It's amazing.
No, and all that early stuff is crazy, and I had an almost religious experience hearing the song Brighton Rock for the first time.
Oh my god, the guitar solo!
And just even like the verses at the beginning and the "Oh Rock of Ages" and all that kind of stuff. And you're talking a guy that would sit and listen to his headphones to the Prophet song over and over again because of what it did in the ears. So my biggest two Queen revelations were definitely Brighton Rock and "It's Late" on News of the World, which I got from a movie. But yeah, I just love those articles. So thanks for writing those.
Oh, no problem. They're my pleasure. I really enjoy what I write. I mean, I do. Definitely right now I've been having a bit of writer's block because I've been taking a break from my book. And then currently what I'm working on, so yeah, I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but I'm working on a blog post about socialist rock musicians. And, as you know, in the entertainment world, most of the musicians are very liberal. There are some conservatives, but I wanted to find ones that were really far left. And I was like, there's more than there's definitely more than I thought. And I was really like, some of them are punk, but then I found ones that weren't punk before that. So I have like my whole list here that I could definitely read out would you like to wait?
No. Like let's get into it a little bit because
okay.
We're gonna link your site and everything for the blog so people can check it out.
Awesome. Yeah. And then my Instagram, I have some content on there. I don't do as much classic rock content. It's all fashion stuff because I like fashion a lot. Okay, here we go. So, Phil Oakes, obviously, we're going to be talking about, and I have a big section on Phil Oakes, and then Dave Van Ronk, who's a friend of Bob Dylan's. Nina Simone's definitely actually the first one I talk about on there, because I think she was one of the older ones on there. And then Tuli Kupferberg of the Fugs will be on there. MC5's going to be on there. Gil Scott-Heron, obviously. Brian Eno, which I really liked his comment on NFTs, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great, because he like calls out NFTs, he hates them, and I'm like, good. And then as for punk rock, you're going to start finding, that's where you're going to find everybody. So Joe Strummer, Paul Weller, Billy Bragg, Jello Biafra. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right.
You did good.
Great. Patti Smith. Then there's the Flying Pickets, and then Chumbawamba. So they did Tub Thumping, but everyone knows them for that song, but it's like they don't know the revolutionary side of them. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to talk about that.
Okay,
Dean
pause,
Reed.
pause for a second. I don't know it. I want to know the socialist side of Tub Thumping.
No, I mean, I don't think that song itself is socialist. The band themselves, though.
Yeah.
So don't worry.
I was like,
Didn't they get in trouble for saying, like, hey, man, steal our CD?
Yeah. I think also, didn't Dexy's Midnight Runners, I think Kevin Rowland ran around with, like, the tape of it and almost, like, demagnetized it while running through the tube. Like, he stole it from the studio or something. I would need to make a badass classic rock thing. Then there's a Turkish musician named Selda, I'm not going to pronounce her last name because I'm going to mess that up. Johnny Marr's on there. Yeah. Richard Hell, I forgot that in punk rock. And then there's going to be a couple names that people might not know, but really interesting story. So there's Victor Jara, who's a folk musician from Chile who was an Allende supporter, and he was killed during the coup. They basically took him and a bunch of the people at the university who were Allende supporters, and they, tortured them and killed them in the stadium. Yeah. There's a Netflix documentary all about it. And then the other one's Dean Reed, who's basically called the socialist Elvis.
I remember him,
fascinating. And then obviously the two most mainstream on there, so it's going to be Ray Davis of the Kinks and Roger Waters. Like, Ray was the one that would come across as everybody's surprise, because everyone's like, oh, come on, that guy's a socialist? He's a big cheapskate. They misconstrue his songs as being, like, very right libertarian. I'm like, whoa, no, they're not. And here's why. I'm going to show you. And it's like, I'm going to go through, like, it's going to look like, Charlie Kelly and It's Always Sunny with that conspiracy board. Right. I'm actually going to come up with one like that for my book. That's about classic rock and something else. It's another one of my interests. People may get hints of it. I'm not going to go into it anymore, but it's going to be fun when I announce it. Like this book that I'm working on. It's halfway done. I just have to get back to working on it.
I have a big line here to bring this up at the end, but since you already talked about it, I'm going to ask you because I really want to know your opinion because I don't really know what's going on. And this is political, people, so I'm just letting you know that. This whole thing about, Pink Floyd not banning their music in Russia, okay?
Well, it depends on which era of Pink Floyd.
Well, that's my question. That's my question. Question is there a meeting somewhere where David Gilmour says, I want all my stuff down from there, and Roger Waters is like, fuck you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, obviously, because they're both the primary songwriters in the early Pink Floyd, well, except for the part with Sid Barrett. Right. Sid Barrett's dead, so... But
anything with Roger Waters, that he has any...
Roger Waters, he's one of those, like, he's definitely a socialist. He's definitely going to be, a lot more, he's not pro-Russia. Like, I'm not going to say he's pro-Russia or whatever. That's not true.
I don't think he is.
Not at all. He doesn't like authoritarianism.
Right.
But, like, he'd definitely be for, like, the human side, like the Russian people. Yeah. But, yeah, like you said earlier, I mean, for some people, classic rock, movies, whatever it may be, that was their happy place. That was their escape from everyday life. It's already hard enough to live under Putin. Now you have to live under Putin and no joys. Yeah. You have to start pirating. Like all these people, I mean, I don't blame these people for pirating.
You think back to the 80s and 70s and 80s when they would pirate records in Russia and they would literally cut the vinyl
records on the bones. X-rays. They had them on X-ray plates.
X-rays. Yeah, that's kind of where that's at. And it wasn't until the 80s when things started to fall a little bit, and you had that big metal concert in Russia and that kind of thing. But before that, everything was bootleg. Everything was contraband. I can remember my cousin used to frequently cross over Checkpoint Charlie into East Germany, and he would take to his friends. He would take over Born in the USA. and Purple Rain and that kind of thing, but smuggle them in. So good.
It's just crazy to think that, like, that's why I'm like, I'm not for that kind of socialism where, things are censored and everything's authoritarian.
Exactly.
But yeah, like, it's just awful. Like, I like the suggestion that I saw somebody on YouTube, like, or no, it's not YouTube, maybe some social media, just commenting, like, why didn't David Gilmour just keep the music in Russia and donate any of the proceeds, anything that he makes from that, donate it to Ukraine?
It's a good compromise. It's a good compromise.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, I mean,
And
can all talk about how, charity, I mean, there's a whole debate on charity. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. But, like, at least it's something. I'm sure that money will go and help people, which that's what it needs.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to mention that any of these things that you mention, the only reason I know about them or pay attention to them is because Roger Waters does his 1990 concert in Berlin, right? That's how my attention is drawn to it. I don't know anything about Falklands unless I listen to the final cut. I don't, I don't know, because I'm in my sheltered, American bubble here. But I wouldn't even look into that. I wouldn't even looked into that unless Roger Waters was going off about it. I wouldn't have paid attention.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
and blocking Roger Waters from the Israelis, for example, that isn't going to. That's one less gateway for them to find out.
And here's another thing about Roger Waters. You go to a Roger Waters show, it is a political rally. I've seen the man.
It's so great.
I've seen him.
Great show.
I've been him 2 or 3 times. Once was like a greatest hits deal in 1999. Once was The Wall. And then this last time, which was not Full Dark Side of the Moon, it was Us and Them tour, I think. And, he has the stacks rise out from... It's the most spectacular visuals of any concert.
Yeah.
But he has the animal stacks rise out, and he has this Donald Trump pig walking around with not polite things for children in an audience all over the thing. You know what I mean? And it's amazing. And, there wasn't... From what I could tell, most of the audience knew what they were getting into. And so there wasn't walkouts, but I knew there had to be.
I remember there was somebody calling him anti-Semitic, and I was just like, oh, that's just a bunch of hogwash.
But you don't know what if someone does that, they don't know what anti-Semitic means.
Yeah.
No.
They don't know the definition. So, anyway, I am going to cut this out. This got very deep here for a second.
Oh, yeah.
Bets, did you have anything you read from the blogs you want to bring up?
I wanted to talk about a little bit about the blog that you did about don't quit your day job kind of thing, and how sobering.
That one was the longest one I ever did.
Yeah, and the fact is, a lot of these people who did return to a day job, it wasn't necessarily a successful day job. It was a really sobering idea that something you have to kind of keep in your mind as a musician is like, this may not be forever, and if the odds are correct, for me, it probably won't be forever. It's a rare thing. That was a very interesting blog post, because we do here in my county, we have some retired rock stars. The guys from Poison are down south of here. Ricky Rocket, I think, has an animal sanctuary. But for years, hanging out with my musician friends, one of the guys from Badfinger and one of the guys from the Dave Clark Five both live locally. And,
Joey Molland.
Okay, I think that might be who it is. Yeah,
he's the only one who's alive from that lineup, because Pete Ham killed himself. Same with Tom Evans, and then Mike Gibbons died like sometime in the 2000s.
Yeah, Mike Score from the Flock of Seagulls. He lives here. I think he restores boats or builds boats, and my friend Paul sees him all the time at the grocery store. Like in his cargo shirt and his t-shirt. Yeah, because I'm like, yeah, I've never had a Mike Score sighting, and Paul's like, I see that guy all the time.
That's crazy.
Like,
so many of the British musicians go to America. I'm guessing part of it's tax reasons for sure. Like
possibly
taxes are very high in Europe.
Yeah, and it's also pretty warm and sunny here in Florida, so that's why they like it. But that was a really sobering one, because like I said, with the exception of the one Ronette, everybody else was sort of like
Ronnie.
It was
like Estelle ended up homeless.
Yeah,
and there's actually like more musicians than I thought who ended up homeless, which is just like really sad. I wanted to write about that too.
Write about it. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like you say, it's sort of a warning out there. Just have a day job, have a backup plan. Just same with athletes, have a backup plan just in case. This is not forever.
Like that's how it is in Ireland. So like we have a thing called GAA. So it's like Gaelic football and hurling. Those are the main sports. Hurling is just where I wouldn't say it's like lacrosse, but yeah, you hit like a ball and then you hit it through the goal or like over the goalpost or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Gaelic football, it's like kind of like I'm not going to get into that, but all the athletes here in Ireland, they have other jobs because the sports here don't pay as much. Like in America, there's just so much money in it.
Yeah.
All the advertising, all the commercialism, and then all the idolization of athletes. Like I remember in high school, I was like, why are these athletes all being idolized? But then, the kids in band, they're just called a bunch of they're called a bunch of geeks, nerds. Oh.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that like certain things are definitely devalued, like more intellectual and artistic pursuits.
Absolutely. And I think there's a component too that you talk about in your blog post about record companies and managers basically stealing. Like how can a band, most famously, how can a band like TLC put out a hit album, hit after hit single, and still be bankrupt? And that has
like it's not always because of being stupid with money, like
No.
or because they blew it all on drugs. Like David Crosby spending all that money on drugs. Like no, that's not always it.
The industry's kind of predatory too.
But even then, like with the drug stuff, a lot of these people get in with bad crowds. There's a lot of seedy people in the industry, and then
Absolutely.
But yeah, that was my longest ever blog post by far. I'm wondering if the Socialist blog post is going to be even longer because it's pretty deep. It's going to be a very deep post, but yeah, I'm hoping to get that finished by International Workers' Day. If not, it's just going to be a part 1, part 2 deal.
It sounds good. I can't wait to read it.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, the current one I'm on right now is just researching Roger Waters. So that's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Especially because he's one of the more mainstream names in like left-wing politics as far as like the celebrities.
Yeah.
All right, so I think this has been a really good talk. I have to wrap this section of our show up for a minute with one last question. This is a question. Bets might know the answer, but this question is for Angie. This is a old man's question to a young person on the internet. Okay?
All right.
If it's uncomfortable, it's because it's uncomfortable asking.
Mm-hmm.
I would like you to explain to me the whole thing with the Victorian orphans, please.
Oh my god! It is basically like the Who is Victorian orphans.
Yes.
I wasn't the one who made the joke. I certainly didn't make that meme up, but I'm just thinking they just look like poor starving little kids. I think because they look so young, and then they look so starving. I mean, so many of these rock stars are skinny as hell. Like I like sometimes when you see what they weighed, I'm like, what? I barely weigh less than that.
And the horrific thing about that is, if you think about it, it could be like post-war starvation. It never occurred to me.
Rationing was long.
Right, when I was reading
the 50s.
Roger talking about like how small he was, and he was like, and we kind of, he's a short guy, short king or whatever. Like, that was post-war malnutrition,
Mm-hmm.
So
That's it for this episode of the Fisher Protocol. We're going to have Angie back really soon to talk about other things. Thanks for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye.